Susan Keller, welcome to Succession Stories. I am excited to be with a fellow mergers and acquisitions professional like yourself, and so glad to be with you.
Thank you so much. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm glad we were able to connect and meet and have so many things in common.
Let's start with you. Let's start how you got into mergers and acquisitions work. What's the backstory?
Sure. I decided in seventh grade I wanted to be a lawyer. Wasn't sure what that really meant, but that's what I said I wanted to do. And when I went to college, my father said, do me one favor. Please get a business degree because someday you might not want to be a lawyer or someday you might need to use that. And I followed his advice and I got a double major in undergrad and I went to law school. And as soon as I got out of law school, I went to work for a very large firm. And I walked in and they're like, hey, we need you on a deal. I'm like, perfect. Didn't even know what like a closing file was or anything, but that's how I ended up doing the work. And the firm I worked for did a lot of very large bank acquisition work. I also did a lot of work in the precious metals industry, buying and selling those businesses. And I'm a deal junkie. I love doing deals. And that's how I started doing it. That's what I even do today. I'm not a lawyer, practicing lawyer anymore. But the company that I run, we work with companies to help them grow and to prepare for transition. So I've taken those skills that I had as a lawyer, as well as the business expertise that I have to now help people grow and sell.
And you and I have such similar interests. And when we were introduced because of the women's WPO, we should give them a plug. The Women's Professional Organization that is around the United States and helps so many women business owners grow their companies and transition with success. And you and I had a mutual contact that said, hey, I think you guys are in a similar space. You should meet and talk. And I'm so glad we were introduced. It's not that often that I meet another M&A professional who's a woman, and it's not only who we work with, right? But I think there is a special place in my heart for fellow women M&A advisors. So that's another reason why I wanted to showcase you and the work that you're doing. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the work that you're doing. And I know you've got a lot of stories, war stories of things that have gone well and things that have not gone well. And those are some of the things I find that our listeners really benefit from. So we'll definitely spend time on that. Let's start with the typical type of situation when it comes to transition planning. I don't know if you've encountered this as your number one question. I get this all the time. How much time do I need to transition my company? That's quite the question, isn't it?
It is, right? And I'm like, well, it really depends, and I'm like, I can give you a bunch of answers, but without your help and cooperation and without you really being prepared and thought about it, it could take a really long time. And I say to people all the time, when you start your business and write your business plan, you should also write your exit strategy. And always when you are growing your business, you need to be thinking about growing as well as what you need to do to provide that additional value. So then when you are ready to sell, you actually can get as much value out of the business as you want. The actual process, I tell people you need to prepare 3 to 5 years in advance. The actual process will be torturous. You will be schizophrenic because you will be having to deal with keeping things quiet, trying to get things ready, as well as continuing to grow your business. And that process can easily take a year or longer.
It really can. I think your answer is spot on. That's how I phrase it too. It depends. And it depends on where we're starting from. If you want to lose weight and you're 600 pounds, that's different than if you're, looking to lose 5 pounds. So let's talk a bit about that in terms of time of transition and areas of focus. If a client is working with you, and again, in your examples, if you have any, where they are, let's pick someone that's given themselves some time. Let's give them, the 5 to 7 year range or 10 years or longer. What is it that you're working on to start with them?
I really do a complete business assessment to see where the gaps are. So I'll look at operations, I'll look at finance, I'll look at people, and I'll look at brand. And then we come up with a plan and a strategy of where you need to make improvements, perhaps people-wise, perhaps operations, processy-wise, in order to really then capitalize on that value. Well, at the same time, I say to them, look, there are maybe projects that you want to undertake that you think are really important. But if you do want to sell in 2 years, do you really want to spend $500,000 on a new piece of equipment when whoever buys you may not need or think that equipment is as valuable? So I'm always telling them to look at how to grow to increase their value, but at the same time, what is it that a buyer would want or not want for your business. I usually say, if you had all the money in the world and you didn't want to sell your business, what would you do to make your business as profitable and successful as possible? Because that's exactly what a buyer is going to do when they come and look at your business. And it really has people look at things a different way. I think the other really important piece that I find a lot is the founder, if they're still involved, is too involved. They're not a true CEO. So I spend a lot of time saying, okay, we need you, owner, to be the CEO. We need you to pull out of those things. You cannot be the brand. You cannot carry on these pivotal, important roles, because then they're going to want to keep you after the sale. And that may be something you don't want. And even if you think you want it, you're probably not going to want it. And that I find to be really hard, is for people to start to separate themselves from the business, so that the real value add is the business and not the person who started it.
Yeah, the owner dependency is really tricky. If owners don't see that inner relationship and how they might be holding back the value of the business, how do you help them look in the mirror and see that?
We do a couple different things. We actually, I make them do their own job description based on what they're actually doing. And then we look at what a job description of a CEO is and see how much of that they're really doing. And it's amazing how often they then like, wow, I'm really in the weeds every day. I'm like, exactly. Lots of times I will actually bring in some of my employees and plug and play them in some of those key roles on senior management, or we'll try to build out their board of advisors or board of directors to give a little more formality and a little more accountability and reporting, so that they understand what it's like to actually grow and get to that level where it's not just about them, it is more about the company.
Do you see
The other
any
thing I
patterns
always,
there? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. So go ahead.
the other thing that I really always ask them to do is to step back and say, what are those things that I value so much that no matter what, I would never change in a sale and when I would go, right? And if they really hone in on what those cultural and values are, they will be able to run that business in a way that allows them to have confidence that they can step back a little bit, because they've created the environment and the culture that allows the business to run.
There are definitely people that I've met along the way that say, I am never leaving. Now, we all know that
Yes.
they will eventually leave, but there are definitely people who do not have a transition mindset. Have you encountered any of those folks and helped them turn the corner?
I'm working with one right now. And this owner is like, I love what I do. I love what I do. And I said, that's great. But at some point, there's going to be other things that you should be doing or that you can no longer do in your business. And you also need to understand that because you're in the business for a long time, your employees who are much younger are always going to start wondering, like, how much longer is he or she going to be here? What is my opportunity? What happens if something happens to that person? So I asked them to actually look at not just at themselves, but at their employees and what they've built. And what is the legacy they want to leave behind? And they often will say, oh, well, I want to do this, this, and this. I'm like, that's great. And then they're like, but I don't know what I would do if I'm not here. I'm like, all right, so come up with your personal exit strategy as well as your professional exit strategy. And we're working on that. And we're putting processes in place for trying to make things run a little bit easier. And this particular client has now sort of embraced it and has gone away on some vacations. I'm like, all right, let's go away for a little bit. Let's see how your team handles things. And you're going to come back and it's going to be okay. And if it's not, then let's figure out where it's not okay. And let's make those corrections now, so that then you can go away again. They can do better. And then the business will start to run on their own. And they will find that there are better things to do in life than run their business.
Have you seen any examples of companies that have attempted a sale, thought they were exit ready, and they were surprised by, if they got offers, what they were, it being lower than expected because of owner dependency issues or other risks in the business?
Yes. I have actually a former WPO member who started and stopped a deal 3 different times because it wasn't the right amount, it wasn't the right deal, the right structure. And again, that's where I really think up front, I blame both the investment banker as well as the owner. Because again, they have to sit back and say, all right, what are the most crucial things for me personally and professionally? And not only what do I want, but what do I need to get out of this deal? And then be very clear And you have to shop. You have to look at who your partners are going to be, who your lawyer is going to be, your investment banker. You have to find the right partner that's going to get you the deal or as close to the deal as you want and think you need. And you got to do your homework. And I think that causes more problems than anything else. Someone gets an email and it says, oh, hey, I'd love to buy your business. And they're like, oh, wow, I think I want to sell my business. That's just silly. You've got to start the process and you've got to do your homework. And that's where I see the deals fall apart. I've also seen deals fall apart for the right reasons, where, the client is very clear about what his or her bottom line number is, or regarding employees or something like that. And they get to a certain point in the deal and the buyer is unwilling, or they just get that sense that this is not the right buyer. And I've advised people, walk away. You will find the right deal with the right partner at the right time, and this may not be it. And so that happened. We went through that a couple of times. And so that deal ended up taking, 2.5 years to close. She got a better price. The employees, 99% of the employees are still there, and the company has been extremely successful.
Yeah, that it does happen. I've seen it too. I had a client that really went pretty far down the path. We had the asset purchase agreement, and the buyer had not secured financing. And we were about 3 weeks away from the intended close date, and the SBA loan was still not finalized. And we just got the feeling that there was just something going on that was just not right. And we pulled the plug on it. And it ultimately, I think, was the right decision, of other things that we found out later. And the client just closed, and they sold to a competitor. And the interesting thing about competitors, I'd be curious about your thoughts. Sometimes we don't want to consider competitors because there's just bad blood, right? And you can't see your employees working in that culture. Other times we're really open to it. Have you had, on the strategic buyer side, some clients on one side of the camp or the other?
I've had it both ways. I think that there's always going to be glitches in culture compatibility, right? No matter what. But if you have a good group of employees and they stick together and you look for the right partner, you're less likely to have those issues. But there's always going to be issues because nobody's going to do it the same way as the owner did. I'm actually working with a client right now who has said, I don't want to sell to private equity. I want to sell to a strategic buyer because have to be someone who knows how to run this business. And I'm thinking to myself, it's not that difficult, right? I mean, again, they're going to learn, and it's so funny. And every offer we've gotten so far is from a strategic buyer, but it's not the right type of strategic. I'm like, okay, so now we have to narrow it down even further. It's not just going to be a competitor. Now it's got to be this, this, and this. But what he does like is a similar situated business was acquired by a private equity shop, and they're doing a roll-up. And this guy ran a business in a similar geographic area, and he knows my client. And so now my client is like, oh, well, this guy was my competitor, but he sold to this group, and he really respected him as a competitor. So he's actually willing to entertain that opportunity, even though that they were competitors, because he's like, wow, well, if he sold to them, then maybe I should sell to them because this would make sense. So it's interesting what goes on in the mind of a seller on what they're willing to do.
Yeah, for sure. And there is an emotional component as well as this practical transactional side. Have you seen a process, a sell side process go askew because emotions got in the way?
Yeah. And I try to avoid that because it's never good. And when there's family dynamics, that's where I've seen some of the emotional issues, where one is the owner, but I worked on a transaction where one was the owner, but family members were involved, and the family member, who was not the key employee, but was also involved, didn't like something. So then I had to inject myself and basically say to the various family members, look, you need to take the emotion out of this. This is the right thing to be done for these reasons. You are part of this transaction, but you are not driving this transaction. And you need to step back and you need to look at the value that's going to come out of this deal. Go back to that piece of paper that I asked you, where I asked you to write down what are the 3 most important things that you want to get out of this deal. If those are true based on this scenario, then let's move forward in a way where we're not letting emotions get in the way. Sort of like when you sell your house, you think your house is beautiful and it's worth $1 million, and someone comes and like, yeah, well, that's not really the case, but you're like, it's my house. And so I get where founders are very emotional because they built this, they've grown it, and it's theirs. And so it is hard to detach. And I also say, look, it's my job. I can be the bad guy or I can be the good guy, but let me be the one who takes the emotion out of it and really interfaces with the appropriate parties. It's a tightrope you have to walk sometimes, but it's also kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. You said you're a deal junkie earlier. I can totally relate to that. I feel
Yeah.
the same way. And there is something that feels so gratifying to represent either one side or the other, whether it's the buyer or the seller. And and just back to that conversation of how do we take emotion out? No one likes to be told their baby is ugly. And we
So
can
true.
handle
Yeah.
that type of scenario because we know it's posturing, we know it's negotiation tactics. I've had a client tell me numerous times, I'm so glad you're on point because I don't think I could handle these conversations by myself. And we have to acknowledge the emotional, we have to acknowledge
Yes.
the feeling that the company is
Yeah.
the baby. Um, when it comes to having a successful transition and having a successful transaction, what are the top 3 things that you see, most commonly?
People understand what the value add is that they bring to the table and what the real value is to a buyer. They get that. They understand the good, bad, and the ugly. They have done their homework, so they've gotten a valuation of their business, so they understand what the parameters are in which they're going to sell. And quite honestly, it's successful when all of the parties work together to accomplish the goal. There's no need for someone to be, a jerk and try to negotiate in a different way. My view is let's get this deal done. It's not going to be perfect for either side, but if everybody gets most of what they want, then to me that's a successful deal. And what it really allows is for the owner to walk away knowing that they are taken care of, their employees are taken care of, and they can walk away because they've got a plan and they're excited about what's coming next.
Absolutely. Susan, if people want to get in touch with you, what's a great way to find you online?
The best way to find me online is you can go to ceoatlas.com, which is my e-learning platform, or you can reach me at susan@kellerexecutives.com.
Thank you so much for being with me. If there's one favorite quote or anything that inspires you day to day, what would that be?
It's funny, one of my favorite quotes is, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And it goes back to what you said earlier about the fact that there's not a lot of us in this industry. And I think the value that we bring is our expertise, and to be able to share that expertise with people who don't have those opportunities and don't have those networks is what's most important.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your insights. And I guess the message for today is to not wait, take the time, have the intention to
Yeah.
work on your transition plan. And as Susan pointed out early in this conversation, even if you're just writing your business plan, that's the time to be thinking about your exit. Susan, thank you so much for coming on Succession Stories and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for allowing me. This was great. Take care.
And to our audience, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to Succession Stories wherever you catch your podcasts and also on YouTube. In terms of beginning with the exit in mind, we're building a course, an online course called Endgame Entrepreneurship. You can find out more information on my website, thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com. Tune in next time to Succession Stories for more insights from transition to transaction.